Previously on FiveWhoFans.
You are going to go and watch the bloody Snowmen tomorrow.
No! I was just making sure you were going to do a video about something Christmas and not Christopher Eccleston.
I don't care what people say. I'm making a video about how great the Ninth Doctor is.
What is wrong with you?
Guess what, Billy? You're going to go, you're going to watch it, and on Friday, you're going to review it.
I'm going to be honest, I've not been looking forward to this episode. I wasn't excited when they released the title, the promotional pictures, the teaser trailers. Every single scrap the BBC released on this episode has left me unexcited, uninspired, and just plain bored. Still, I've tried to watch this episode with an unbiased open mind, because I'm a good person. Last year, I didn't finish watching the Christmas special. It was so obscenely awful that I had to turn the television off before the ordeal was over. Still, I had to watch all of this episode, because I had to review it. Still, with last year's special in mind, and the atrocity that was the Snowmen, I decided to make a little list of times when I wanted to turn the television set off, but couldn't. I wanted to turn the television off, but couldn't when Clara's head appears upside down and says, "Doctor Who." I think she needs a doctor. The Ice Woman starts shouting, "Naughty children! Bow ties are cool." Yet another kiss! A whole family crying on Christmas Eve. Before we focus on the episode and the story itself, let's address the big changes that have been made in preparation for the 50th anniversary. The titles underwent a dramatic change, and whilst I enjoyed the new theme tune, it felt considerably confused visually. Sometimes there are these really odd, jarring, sharp movements that give the titles a bit of an amateur feel. It was nice in the Doctor's face, though. In fact, I really enjoyed that part, particularly the fact that it wasn't a solid cutout, but a faded image that blended almost seamlessly with the other nebulas. If only the TARDIS doors didn't open the wrong way at the end. If only the TARDIS doors didn't open at all. The new TARDIS interior looks brilliant. It's become more simplified, which makes it more aesthetically pleasing. Whilst I enjoyed the last console room, I'm really going to miss that glass floor, sometimes it became a bit visually confusing because there was just so much going on. I also really like the way the top of the time rotor now rotates. In fact, John Gransden actually predicted that weeks in advance when he saw the picture in the first place. I could almost hear him in my head shouting,
Yes! My life isn't worthless. I guess something right about Doctor Who!
The problem with this new console room is the size of the set. It's decreased dramatically, and I can kind of see myself getting a little bit bored of it after a few more episodes. It's very grey. One character I found surprisingly endearing was Commander Strax, and whilst he was a bit off-centre in the delivery at times, he got a brilliant few lines in. I genuinely wouldn't mind seeing him again. I really enjoyed the idea of the staircase leading up to the TARDIS. It fitted with Moffat's fairy tale interpretation for the show, whilst at the same time remains justified as it represents the Doctor's need to be isolated and separate from humanity. Still, there were some pretty awful, jarring moments that just threw me off this episode completely. Firstly, it's the use of catchphrases. Now, everyone has a favourite word, but to constantly repeat the same phrase over and over, mostly for comedic effect, is both unfunny and throws any scrap of realism out the window. I'm fed up with them, and they're annoying me. I'm sorry, but it's just bad writing. And then there's Clara's death. She's just entered the TARDIS and been given the key. It's a moment of wonder and joy for our new companion. Oh wait, she's dead. The death itself is suitably tragic. The problem is that, well, I feel really bad for saying this, but Clara's death was positively comedic after such a brief jolly moment between the two characters. The contrast between the tones is so binary, it's funny. I enjoyed Matt Smith's performance as a Dark Doctor, though his quiet, somewhat subdued Doctor doesn't quite match the same intensity that Christopher Eccleston's did. Though of course you all know by now how much I love the Ninth Doctor. Also, is it me, or does the Doctor change his clothes to show grief? Rose is gone, he gets a new suit. Pons are gone, he changes his costume. Heck, even the 8th Doctor swaps his clothes when he changes his mood in the audio adventures. By the way, the universe doesn't care? Maybe it's because you're wiping everyone's minds, Doctor. Jenna-Louise Coleman's Clara was one of the main focuses of this episode, and rightly so, though the first thing that popped into my head when she made her first impression was my irritation at her Cockney voice. Still, I missed her Cockney voice later on, because her posh voice was even more annoying. That aside, Coleman's performance itself was fantastic, though the character, well, she's a bit of a victim, which I can see hardcore feminists launching themselves at full speed. Even if she does indirectly save the day, she has to die to do it, and not even of her own choice. Another serious problem I found with her character was that she wasn't at all relatable or believable. It just doesn't work, particularly in her first encounter with the Doctor. Still, I can't wait to see what's happening with her character and why variations of her keep coming back. Though, let's face it, these days death has no emotional value whatsoever in Doctor Who. That's a real problem. Death has become really devalued, because when someone dies, they're very likely coming back to life, particularly if they're a main character. No one cares about someone dying if they're constantly coming back to life. The Snowmen themselves, surprisingly enough, didn't feature an enormous amount, which, even though it's the title of the episode, I didn't mind, because they were really naff and, let's face it, just plain silly, lacking completely in seriousness, earnestness and scariness altogether. The Ice Lady was absolutely incredible, flawless CGI, but that's pretty much all there was to her. I mean, naughty children. Come on! And then there's Dr. Simeon. Richard E. Grant was wasted on this role, just as Sir Ian McKellen was wasted on The Great Intelligence, and Mitchell and Webb were wasted on robots. The Gandalf glass ball and Dr. Simeon both felt like cliché villains and therefore a little bit dull, with no particular obvious or interesting motivations or objectives. I came away from this episode feeling nothing in particular. This is the most average Doctor Who episode I have ever seen. But I kind of felt like the only thing that made it average was the elements that were introduced for the 50th anniversary and the intrigue they brought with them. Without those, this, as a standalone episode, was poor. I don't really want the only thing keeping me going with this episode being Moffat throwing new stuff at me. A solid, intriguing plot with believable, genuine characters would have been much nicer, thanks. Cheers. I have a feeling I'm going to get torn to shreds after uploading this review.
Fantastic, fantastic.